A pediatric assistant is finding the growth of an infant over a 3-month period. The baby grew 1/6 an inch during the first month, 1/8 an inch the second month, and 1/7 an inch the first month or third month. How much did the infant grow? The total growth would be given by the first month's growth plus the second month's growth plus the third month's growth. So we're adding these 3 fractions. So we get this addition of 3 fractions. There are multiple ways to do this addition, but the most straightforward way for this course would be to just add from left to right, beginning with the first 2 fractions. So when we're adding these fractions, since they have different denominators, we need to think about what we can do to get a common denominator. Preferably the least common denominator. We need to think about what is the smallest number that is divisible by both 6 and 8. It happens to be 24, so the lowest common denominator is 24. This is the smallest number that is divisible by both 6 and 8. What we want to do is build up these fractions to equivalent fractions with that denominator 24. So we look at the first fraction, we have to think about what do we need to multiply by 6 to change this denominator 24. What times 6 equals 24? Well, 4. So if we multiply 6 by 4, we'll get the denominator 24. And if we multiply 6 by 4, we have to also multiply 1 by 4 because we want to get an equivalent fraction. Hence, we have here that we're multiplying 1 and 6 by 4 because we want the denominator here to be 24 and we need an equivalent fraction, so we have to do the same thing to the numerator. This leads us to this fraction 4 over 24. 1 times 4 would be 4, 6 times 4 would be 24, which is what we want. We want a denominator of 24, so what we did was we found an equivalent fraction to 1/6 that has denominator 24. We do the same thing with 1 over 8 here. We want the denominator to be 24, so we think, what can we multiply by 8 to get 24? Well, 3. So we would multiply 8 by 3. This would give us 24 in the denominator. In order to get an equivalent fraction, we have to do the same thing to the numerator. So we also multiply the numerator by 3. So then we'd have 1 times 3 on the top, which is 3, and 8 times 3 on the bottom, which is 24. What we wanted a denominator of 24. This fraction, 3 over 24, is equivalent to the fraction 1 over 8 because we did the same thing to numerator and denominator to get this fraction of 3 over 24. So now we have 2 fractions, both with denominator 24. So we can just add them by adding the numerators and keeping the common denominator, adding fractions with like denominators. So we add the numerators, keep the common denominator. 4 over 24 plus 3 over 24 becomes 7 over 24 because we add the numerators 3 and 4 to get 7, and we keep the common denominator of 24. This narrows it down to 2 fractions, 7 over 24 and 1 over 7, that third fraction that we haven't touched yet. So now we have 2 fractions that we're adding with different denominators. Again, we need a common denominator. We need to have same denominators before we can add these. So we need to find the least common denominator of 7 and 24, and it just so happens that 7 and 24 do not have any common factors, so the least common denominator is the product of 7 and 24, or 168. This is a method you can use to find any common denominator. You multiply the denominators and you get a common denominator. When you're doing this, when you're multiplying the denominators to get your denominator, you're just going to be multiplying each fraction by the other denominator to get equivalent fractions. So like 24 times 7 would give us 168 in the denominator, which is what we want. And 7 is also the denominator of the other fraction. So what we're doing is multiplying the first fraction by the denominator of the second fraction to get this denominator of 168 and an equivalent fraction. So here we did 7 times 24 to get 168, and we had to do the same thing to the numerator to make it an equivalent fraction, so we get 7 times 7 on the top, which is 49. So 7 over 24 is equivalent to 49 over 168. Over here with 1/7, we are multiplying by the other denominator because 7 times 24 is 168, and it just so happens that 24 is also the other denominator. So we have to do the same thing in the numerator here because we want an equivalent fraction. So we multiply denominator by 24 to get 168, multiply the numerator by 24 to get 24. 24 times 1 is 24. So now 1 over 7 is equivalent to the fraction 24 over 168, which has the denominator that we want, 168. So now we have two fractions with the same denominator, so we can add these as fractions with common denominator. We just add the numerators, keep that common denominator. 49 plus 24 is 73 over that common denominator of 168. So then this is actually not reducible, so this is going to be our final answer. 73 over 168 inches is the total growth over the 3 months.